Hello everybody, Buddy Webb, Midland, Texas. I got a video this morning I think you're going to find real interesting, and I started with a Facebook post here yesterday that says, which police officer is the would-be killer? And then I started in there, I said, the evidence is clear that somebody under my home shot me by surprise with my phone lines cut, and we know that there were police under my home that night, so either one of them was the shooter or they know who was, right? Can we all agree to that? Okay, so I made them statements, but here I want to look at some facts before we start into looking at all of the police that were caught on camera and all that stuff. Okay. And so here's a Facebook post that I did this morning, and I started here. I said, can we all agree that if I wasn't shot with my gun, then I was shot with another gun, and that means somebody came to my home and shot me? Can we agree to that? I mean, I asked the FBI agent that. Boy, it pissed him off when I did, and I started naming off the evidence. You know, I 100% believe he's corrupt and he's covering up, the capital murder attempt of my life and these other, crimes here. And so here I'm going to go over this evidence here. Multiple proofs show that I wasn't shot with my gun, including this one. This is capital attempted murder case because nobody accidentally sneaks into a private home and accidentally shoots the owner by surprise with the phone lines cut. I think we can all agree to that. They didn't cut my phone lines. I crawled out because I didn't have any communications. They stole my cell phone, disconnected my home phone line. Okay. And I said, somewhere out there are some extremely dangerous criminals who have been allowed to go free after shooting me inside my home. I wonder how many people they shot who didn't crawl out and survive, or how many murders they've committed and made it look like an accident. I suspect they were involved in the suspected murder of the last guy that owned this house. And here was my first proof right here. It's right from the police report. So it's not my word against their word. This is the CSI. Y'all watch the show, Crime Scene Investigators. Right there, the experts, forensic evidence and all that right here. CSI, Marty Barrett, at 1:29:12, approximately 12:10, dispatched to the hospital. I received evidence from Officer Chandler and included a pistol and a wallet. That's interesting because it was Rodriguez that had taken that, and that's documented. I said I then proceeded to 3802 Fair Circle to process the crime scene. I photographed it with a digital camera. I collected evidence from the scene that included a shotgun. Okay, I want to show you that because they falsely claimed I was shot with my shotgun. And then same CSI. This is the guy that checked in most of the evidence, checked in the gun. He checked in 4 live Remington 12 gauge shotgun shells. Okay, and see my note here, he didn't know empty shotgun shell found. I made a big point of that. Okay, that's a big deal, that he didn't check in an empty shotgun shell. And the reason is because of the Remington 12 gauge shotgun, if I had shot myself with that gun, the empty shell would have been in the chamber. You would have had to unload the empty shell before you could get the live shells unloaded out of it, because it was a pump shotgun. Okay, and that's what I'm saying at the top. Okay, so right off the bat, there's the number one. There's one proof that I wasn't shot with my gun, because there was no empty shotgun shell checked in by the CSI that had checked in the live shotgun shells. Okay, they did check in the empty shotgun shells a couple years later after I made a big point of it, and it was Matt Davis right before he quit the police department, and he was the guy that had wrote me and said, "Buddy, I stole the evidence, and nobody's ever going to find out." Okay. Next proof. Another proof showing that I wasn't shot with my gun was the size of pellets removed from my foot were 2.5 sizes different than the size of pellets removed from my gun. Okay, and then I make a note. I said, notice the CSI above conveniently left out the size of pellets, and I believe that was on purpose, as he knew that I hadn't been shot with my gun, and that proves it. Now think how scary it is for a CSI tampering with evidence in a premeditated capital attempted murder. I suspect there are people on death row based on evidence this CSI had swore to. Okay. And so I'm going to show you this next proof. And that's not Buddy said, he said, my word against their word. This is the medical report right here. This is the size of pellets removed from my foot. And what happened was they come in and they stole my spare shotgun shells from my home. The police did on that first night. But they had overlooked one, and I found it. And this what proved the size. See the size 7.5. Okay. So then we go to the chart. It's 2.5 sizes different. So the size size of pellets removed from my foot were 2.5 sizes different than the size of pellets that were removed from my gun. That's ballistic evidence. That's proof that I wasn't shot with my gun. And see, I actually believe I was shot with this right here, called a Glazer safety slug. It's a plastic tip pellet filled bullet. And the size of pellets in this right here actually do match what's on the lab report. And this bullet can be fired from a 45 handgun. And you're going to see in a minute that I documented a woman telling me I was shot with a 45. Okay. Here's another proof. Another proof is when I saw the surgeon had stated he removed a large amount of plastic from the wound, and it wouldn't have been there if I'd been shot with a standard 12 gauge shotgun. Okay, I'm gonna show you. It's right here. This is the operating room report from the surgeon. There was a large amount of plastic lead pellet debris. Okay, that's what the surgeon said. Well, if you understand how a shotgun shell is built, the only plastic in there is the wadding. Okay, and the wadding follows the shells into the wound. It's found on the entrance side of the wound. Well, look here. The ER doctor, my brother-in-law that I didn't know was my brother-in-law, had removed the wadding in the emergency room before surgery. Okay, and so it wasn't the wadding. Okay, and so, but keep in mind, I believe I was shot with a plastic tip pellet-filled bullet to make it appear that I was shot with a shotgun. And that way they could call this failed murder an accident and get that extra $500,000. That's what was going on. Okay, and then yet another proof was Lisa Rogers, who told me that I was shot with a 45 handgun. The Glazer safety slug comes in a 45 handgun size. And I go on and I say, the fact is there just wasn't enough physical room for me to be shot with my 4-foot-long shotgun in my tiny room. I wondered if her son was under my home when I was shot, and that's how she knew this. And so I have the print screen. Law enforcement could talk to her. Lisa Rogers told me, you're not disabled after being shot with a 45. She knew I was shot with a 45. Keep that in mind. That's important. That's big, and it fits all the evidence. One thing I was going to put in here and I forgot was Rosie Rodriguez, Detective Rosie Rodriguez. She wrote on the police reports, falsified the police report, and then perjured herself in court. That's aggravated felony perjury, and stated that she found a tripwire on my gun. But there's no tripwire in evidence, and none of the other 10 police that were at my home mentioned a tripwire, including the CSI that said he picked up my gun. And besides proof showing I wasn't shot with my gun, Rosie Rodriguez lied. That's all there is to it about a premeditated capital attempted murder. And then here's supporting evidence showing that I wasn't shot was Lieutenant Dickey was inside my home at 11:05 when he wasn't seen arriving on the security cameras that saw Woodward and Naylor at 11:01. This is what proved he entered my home from the now removed trapdoor the ex-wife had already told me about and from where I'd been ambushed and shot from. Okay, and so see, I didn't get this police report until 2019, 7 years later. And they were hiding it because that's what it did. It timestamped this police officer inside my home, and he wasn't seen arriving on the security cameras. Well, how'd he get in there, buddy? He came in from the trap door the ex-wife told me about. That's how he got into my home. The police were under my home, and somebody under my home had shot me. So now we know why they're lying, why they're smearing my name, tampering with evidence, committing perjury, and all these other crimes. More supporting evidence is the multiple people documented as saying that tunnels and underground homes are near my home, along with Google Maps showing a large building in my backyard that can't be seen from above ground, and what looks like a large tunnel ditch coming directly at my home from the Home Depot store. This is how Lieutenant Dickey and the other officers were at my home without being seen on the camera. And I'm going to show you this. I found this on Google Earth historical maps. And this picture was taken about 6 months before the murder attempt. And I'm going to show you that ditch coming out of the back, that where you can see where the ground had been cut out of the back of Home Depot, aimed directly at my house. You see that? Where it was aimed directly at my house. That's how Dickey got in my home, and the people that shot me, And then in my backyard, right here, okay, I'm going to show you on Google Maps, it shows a large building in the backyard you can't see from above ground. I believe that's one of the 4 underground homes that multiple people have said were here. That include Rhonda Denman Rogers, documented, saying there was an underground facility a half block away. A phone call secretly recorded. A woman said there's 4 3-bedroom $1 million underground homes. They're having pedophile parties there. That's a YouTube video. You can listen to it. Screenshot. Ricky Ronaldo said him and his brother used to live in my house, and they used to go in the tunnels of my house when they lived here. Okay, that's supporting evidence showing I wasn't shot with my gun. Phone call. Layla O'Brien said that she worked on this underground project. She worked for PBK. She was a CAD programmer. They had a budget of $7.35 million. Finished 1987. They were put in for George H.W. Bush from Midland, who was vice president at the time under Reagan, and this was called the Safe House Project. Okay. Phone call. Joe Lozano secretly recorded. He was running for Midland sheriff. It said that our late sheriff Gary Painter used to hide out in the underground homes here. Police report. And the cameras shows that officers Davis, Dickey, Chadwell, Angel, and Hale entered my home from the underground entrance. It would timestamp them at or inside my home when they were not seen arriving on security cameras that had seen Woodward and Naylor. That's how we know. How'd they get in my home? From that tunnel right there. That's how they got in my home. Angie McGee Hurley told me about a young girl that was murdered in an oil show party 5 minutes drive from my home. I believe she was there parking in the Home Depot parking lot, coming in this tunnel right here, going to the underground parties were in the underground home in the backyard. That's where they're having the oil show parties during the Permian Basin International Oil Show. Famous and wild parties put on by wealthy people. Google Maps shows a large bunker in my backyard that can't be seen from above ground. That's what we're looking at. Video, concrete being poured behind my home after showing Homeland where a tunnel location was. I was back here with Homeland Security because Homeland Security is supposed to take care of human trafficking, and they murdered a little girl here that wouldn't prostitute, right? A human trafficking murder. I showed them where this was. I showed them this map. 2 weeks later, this ground is dug up and concrete's being poured there, but I get it on video. I get a video on it in 2019. 3 months after that, the Secretary of Homeland resigns. And then 6 days later, Secretary of Energy resigns. And I believe some oil companies, multi-billion-dollar oil companies, were leaning it on them to help them cover up the oil show party murders. Screenshot. Lance Eggleton says, we have access to your residence at all times. Nobody will ever believe your story. You will be silenced, not if, but when. Obviously, Lance, that threatened my life, knows about the underground access to my home, as many other people do. Okay, so I just wanted to clear that up before we ever start on the main part of the video, which is which police officer is the would-be killer. And like I said, if it wasn't one of them, obviously they know who was, right? Okay. Below are the police now identified as being at my home that night. Tell me which one you think is the shooter, aka would-be killer, or if you think it was somebody else and they're just assisting with this capital attempted murder. There was a person that wrote on my YouTube channel one time and says, "Buddy, it could have been one of them, one of them police officers' kids, and they were underground and having a party down there or whatever, and these police are covering it up for their kids." And I think that's very possible, that it is a young crowd. I think that's the same age group as them next door neighbor kids, where they had a suspected tunnel entrance next door. Okay. Here we go. Martin County Sheriff John Woodward. I'm going to go over these police officers, and I'm just going to tell the facts, okay? And you tell me, interactive, I think it might have been Woodward that shot you. I think it was Rosie Rodriguez that shot you. You just let me know which one you think it is, okay? Martin County Sheriff John Woodward. Woodward was seen arriving at my home 19 minutes after I crawled out. It's still unknown how a sheriff from another county can be at my home minutes after a murder attempt, but assume that he was under my home when I was shot. He resigned in 2014 after allegations of him getting drunk with an inmate while getting a Santa Muerta tattoo. That's a saint of death. It's used by cult members and drug dealers. In 2019, he pled guilty to assault charges and didn't serve any prison like a normal person would have. Woodward was a secret police until 2018 when Empire Private Investigations collected the reward money and identified him. It was found out in 2019 from the illegally withheld police report that he wasn't dispatched to my home and his name had been illegally omitted from the report. He was married to former news reporter Devin Sanchez, who I believe right now is communication director for Odessa. She got a big old promotion out of this, or for some reason. Midland Sheriff Deputy Mike Naylor. Naylor was seen following Woodward to my home, and he was also not dispatched. Just happened to drive up on a capital attempted murder, whatever. His name had been illegally omitted from the police report, and it's suspected that he was also under my home when I was ambushed and shot with my phone lines cut. Now, keep in mind, he worked for Painter, and Lozano said Painter used to hide out down here. Okay. He died in the line of duty in October 2014, but he wasn't identified as a secret police in 2018. This happened because I had saved up disability money and offered a award to get the 11 secret police identified. I didn't know at this time there was a police report since it had been withheld after being subpoenaed. He was married to a woman from my hometown of Hobbs, New Mexico, and he is buried in Hobbs. Okay. The public was never told that he was a secret police. They got him. He's a hero. He died in the line of duty. Some people have wondered if these other secret police didn't take him out, if he wasn't going to snitch on them. That's still a question up in the air. Midland detective Rosie Rodriguez. Rosie climbed in my truck at the 7-Eleven after I crawled out and started giving me first aid, and then claimed on the police report she wasn't there. See, I thought the cavalry had arrived when the police showed up. I thought finally they're going to stop these crimes, not even suspecting that the police were involved. She lied on police reports and said that I had a tripwire attached to my gun when there was no tripwire in evidence, and none of the other officers mentioned a tripwire, along with proof showing that I wasn't shot with my gun. It came out in court that she was a lifelong friend of my ex-wife who had filed divorce 5 days earlier and is now accused of being involved in the shooting by her former boyfriend. She was seen on a camera. Rosie was seen on a security camera leaning over my nightstand where my stolen cell phone had been planted, and made up a lie on the police report saying that I told her my battery was dead on my phone. Obviously, she knew they stole my cell phone and cut my phone lines before shooting me. She personally tried to have me committed and then closed my case by calling this premeditated capital attempted murder an accident. I didn't find out she was the lifelong friend of the ex-wife until 2 years later, Okay. And, and the former boyfriend of the ex-wife, he wrote on his Facebook that he overheard her planning my murder with her police friends to steal life insurance. I've got a print screen of him saying that. Midland officer April Chandler. April falsely claimed on the police reports that she climbed in my truck at the 7-Eleven and was giving me first aid when it was Rosie that had been there. Less than an hour after the murder attempt, she was filling out a hospital form and started to write that I'd shot myself, but scribbled that lie out and then said I'd caused myself to suffer a gunshot wound. She was blaming me for staying home, minding my own business, and surviving a murder attempt. She stated on the police report that she found my 222 guns and my voice recorder, which had recorded the burglar alarms going off before the shooting, and they were checked into evidence, but the voice recorder wasn't checked into evidence. It was checked into evidence over a year later when I made a point of police stealing evidence, which I told them about, once again by Matt Davis, right before he quit the police force. She made up a life-destroying lie and claimed that I was a paranoid schizophrenic when I hadn't been diagnosed with this disease, nor do I have it. I'm the victim of capital attempted murder. I was a 28-year company man, homeowner, granddad. This lie was attached to my name on the police computers, even though I was cleared by mental health at the hospital. My name has been smeared worldwide to cover up this failed murder. She's also seen standing next to Rosie Rodriguez, leaned over my nightstand where my stolen cell phone was planted, and then seen searching my drawers on 12912. I have the picture on that. Midland Lieutenant Tony Dickey. The long-withheld police report showed that Dickey was inside my home at 11:05 p.m. when he wasn't seen arriving at my home as Woodward and Naylor had been 4 minutes earlier at 11:01. That's a big deal. I crawled out at 10:42 p.m. The reason I crawled out is because they'd cut my phone lines, right? Since all of my other doors were secured with extra locks due to the crimes I had been reporting then. This proved he came in to my home from the now removed trap door that the ex-wife had already told me about and where I'd been ambushed and shot from. The report showed he stated that I had booby traps in my home, but this was another lie as there's no booby traps in evidence. It makes sense that he let out the burglar who is now known to have been trapped in my guest bathroom, and this may have been the motive for murder. The irony is that I was shot during a burglary after reporting repeated burglaries to my home, and the police were working with the burglars that were breaking into my home. Okay. Dickey, major suspect. Maybe Dickey was the would-be shooter, the AKA would-be killer, the shooter. Midland Sergeant Matt Davis. Now, Matt Davis is a big suspect, too. Matt was listed as being at my home and not seen arriving on security cameras, and based on the police report, it looks like he came to my home with Dickey. Okay. The report also showed that he tried to call my ex-wife twice about an hour after the murder attempt, so the question has been asked if he was working with her in this murder attempt that she's alleged to be involved in. He checked in the 222 guns that Chandler said she had found with my voice recorder, but not the voice recorder, so it's suspected that he stole this evidence. He quit the police department right after the protective order hearing in December 2013, and it looks like this is when he checked in the stolen voice recorder and missing empty shotgun shells that I made a big deal about. He had my keys after the murder attempt, so it's possible he was involved in covering up the now removed trapdoor that he had entered my home from. In 2019, he wrote to me on my YouTube channel and said, "Buddy, I stole the evidence and nobody is ever going to find out." I have a print screen of that. Midland CSI Marty Barrett. Barrett said on the police report that he picked up my shotgun from my home, but he didn't mention the tripwire which Rodriguez falsely claimed was attached to my gun. He checked in 4 live shells from my gun, but he didn't check in an empty shell, which would have been in the chamber if I'd shot myself, as was falsely claimed. I mentioned that a minute ago. Live shells were checked in a few years later by Matt Davis, or empty shotgun shells were checked in a few years later by Matt Davis after I made a big point about no empty shotgun shells being found. He conveniently, Barrett conveniently omitted the size of pellets in the shotgun shells when he checked them in as evidence. I believe this was on purpose, as he knew that I hadn't been shot with my gun. He checked in my stolen debit card, which was missing the week before the murder attempt. I had already reported it lost stolen to the bank before the murder attempt. You know, when I got the evidence logs, I go, look, there's my debit card. You know, it was checked in as evidence, and it was stolen the week before the murder attempt. So the police had my debit card. That's what happened. And then after I survived the murder attempt, they stuck it back in my wallet. I'm suspecting that Rodriguez did that, but I don't know that. Midland K-9 police officer Chad Simpson was one of the first ones seen in my bedroom on the security camera the police had tried to disable, but accidentally started it. He wasn't dispatched and his name had been omitted from the long-withheld police report. In December 2019, 2 months after secret police Naylor died, he murdered his wife and his 2 children in the house and then killed himself. This happened 2 days after I posted his picture to my Facebook along with the story about the girl being murdered at the Underground Oil Show party in 2010. Both Chad and Sandra were from my hometown of Hobbs, New Mexico. I got the feeling that his aunt, Annette Mobley, had more information based on some rude things she had said to me. Okay. And so some people, once again, just like Naylor, this was 2 months after Naylor died, okay, that people wondering if Chad was going to snitch on the other secret police, and, you know, and that was a double murder used to cover up the underground homes and all the other crimes. Okay? Midland Sergeant Greg Chatwell. He was another officer that was time-stamped as being at my home, but not seen arriving on the security cameras that saw Woodward and Naylor, which means that he was also under my home. I believe that he used a robot in my home, which was most likely a con job to smear my name and cover up this home invasion and premeditated murder attempt. Midland Officer Dylan Hale. He was another officer that was time-stamped as being at my home, but not seen arriving on the security cameras that saw Woodward and Naylor, which means that he was also under my home. He was on the second entry to my home on 2/1/12, 3 days later, which was supposed to be the only known entry, as they were hiding the police report from the entry for 1/29/12. That's when they got caught on camera. If they hadn't accidentally started the camera, then they would have got away with this, you know, because they come in on that first night and the pictures of the secret police, they tried to disable that camera and accidentally started it. That's the only reason we know they were in there on the first shot. And then they come in on the second shot. Oh, but it's crazy. Let's get the bomb squad here, you know. And it was all a con job. And they were hiding the fact that they'd been in my home stealing evidence and staging the crime scene. Remember, Rosie Rodriguez was seen leaned over my nightstand where my stolen cell phone was planted. And then she made up that lie saying I told her my battery was dead. You know, I mean, this is a major con job. That's what it was. Midland Officer Kenny Angel. He was another officer time-stamped being in my home, but not seen arriving on the security camera saw Woodward and Naylor, which means that he was also under my home. Other than that, I don't have much information. Midland Officer Joe Ramirez, who's another officer that was time-stamped as being at my home, but not seen arriving on the security cameras that saw Woodward and Naylor, which means that he was also under my home. And then Greg Nelson. He was identified by Empire Brand Investigation in 2018 as being seen on camera at my home in 2012. He wasn't dispatched, and his name has been illegally omitted from the police report. 6 police officers had their names illegally omitted from the police report. That's not an accident, folks. That's a crime. That's a felony. Midland Mark Gilliam. He was identified by Empire Private Investigation in 2018 after being seen on camera at my home in 2012, and he wasn't dispatched, and his names had been illegally omitted from the police report. That's a felony, folks. Okay, and I will show you here this first list right here. This is the ones identified by the private investigator. Have you ever heard of a citizen offering a reward to identify police? This is the first time in the history of America. That's how absurd this is. This is the names from the police report that I did, that, you know, that I didn't get until 2019. And that's when I'm comparing them, going, there's 6 people here. Their names were omitted from the police report. 5 officers time-stamped as being at or in my home and not seen arriving on security cameras, etc. And this was the second entry 3 days later after they had got poured concrete, covered up the underground home, planted my cell phone, stolen them live shotgun shells that were in my closet, etc. Okay. And here, the only 2 people that are common, Rosie Rodriguez and Dylan Hale. And I wonder if, as a bomb squad there, I wonder if them other guys were told that these other officers had been inside my home planting evidence still in the stage in the crime scene, right? Because nobody was supposed to know that. And they were there, oh, it's not safe, we need the bomb squad. But they left out the fact all these people were in my home 3 days earlier for a long time, okay? It was safe while they were here leaning over my nightstand. You see what I'm saying? Okay, here, now I want to show you here the evidence. Here, these are the first 2 secret police that were seen arriving 19 minutes after I seen crawled out. This is Woodward and Naylor, okay? This was on my security camera. I had crawled out after being ambushed and shot. The first one is Martin County Sheriff John Woodward. And remember I told you about him, now he's a convicted felon, etc. And then the second was the late Sheriff Deputy Mike Naylor. You're going to see him get out of the car. Obviously, they were under my home when I was shot, and they just drove around front. And the other officers came in from the underground trap door. That's what happened, okay? A few hours later, there was an attempt to disable the camera at 3:15 a.m. That's what the log file shows. A few hours later, this group was seen inside my home, planting evidence and staging the crime scene, okay? And these were the pictures, right here. I passed that around. $2,000 reward. First time in the history of America, a crime victim offered a reward to identify a place, And then Empire Pride Investigations identified them in 2018, and that was their name. That's where I got the name from right there. I paid for that. I saved up disability money and paid for it, okay? And I'm going to show you here. The police report for the night of the murder attempt was subpoenaed in 2013, but illegally withheld. We're talking about one crime after another crime after another crime after another crime. And I didn't know it existed until 2019, 7 years after being shot. It's taken a long time. I know we're 10 years later. That's because of obstruction of justice by these police. It timestamped 5 police officers at or inside my home or not seen arriving. And I want to show you, this right here was from the police report I didn't get till 7 years later. And that timestamped Dickie in my home saying no one in the house, inside, and lots of odd things like booby traps. And as I mentioned a while ago, there's no booby traps in the evidence. There was no booby traps here. Dickie lied. That's all there is to it. And Dickie was in my home, and he wasn't seen arriving on a security camera that saw Woodward and Naylor at 11:01. Okay? And so, that's why they withheld the police report. They're busted. You can't get any more busted, okay? So obviously one of those police is the shooter, aka would-be killer, or they know who did kill me, or tried to kill me. Another thing, before I read this last section, it's now known that a burglar was trapped in my guest bathroom, and that might have been the motive for murder because, it's believed that they were working with the burglar. I think I did mention that I believe that Dickie, since he was in my house, he's the one that let out the trapped burglar, instead of arresting him and putting him in prison for a decade, as it should have happened, because burglary of habitation is still a crime in the state of Texas, right? They decided to murder the crime victim and let out the burglar. That's what it looks like happened. And this is a very important part. Due to the horrific and nightmarish crimes committed against me by this criminal gang, some people have assumed that I was a cop hater, when the truth is that I've been a lifetime supporter of law enforcement. I understand that not all cops are good and not all cops are bad, and have been counting on the good cop police to arrest the criminals involved in the many crimes and murders here. It's the bad cops who give the good cops a bad name. They undermine the trust the public places in law enforcement and endangers the life of the police officers who uphold the law, the ones who don't sneak under homes, the ones that don't lie on police reports, tamper with evidence, and cover up premeditated capital attempted murders. The good cops, they don't do that. We all know that if a good cop reports a bad cop, then they can place their own life in danger. And that's what people have wondered, if Naylor and Simpson were murdered because they were going to snitch on these other police. This is why the public needs to take a stand against public police corruption and let the good cops know that we have their backs. Okay, I want to make that real clear. I seen a YouTube, oh, Buddy hates the cops today, and I'm going, nobody don't hate the cops. I'm a lifetime supporter of law enforcement. Okay, so I thought y'all would find that interesting. Buddy Webb, Midland, Texas. You know, somewhere out there we got some would-be killers walking free, and they're breaking in homes, cutting phone lines, and killing people. Buddy Webb, Midland, Texas.